The key to getting everything that you want in life is actually to go into your pain, the pain from the past that you are likely unconsciously recycling into the present. And that is at the source of whatever resistance you experience when it comes to reaching your goals. Nobody wants to hear that. That's not sexy. How do you market that? Right? Like
Right.
you don't. And for men especially, we just, for some reason, we seem to need a big smack upside the head that gets us to wake up.
Are you tired of feeling like you are destined for greatness but struggle to get out of your own way? Our guest today is here to help you navigate those frustrating self-imposed roadblocks. He's an international men's transformation coach and spiritual mentor, and he's got the skills to help purpose-driven men and entrepreneurs reach their full potential in every aspect of their lives. Welcome to the show, the one and only Jake Kauffman.
Mike, thanks so much for having me, brother. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, sir. And guys, I appreciate you being with us, whether you're tuning in on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Thank you for being here. And guys, you can tune in with Jake at awakewithjake.com. And on social media, I got that clickable in the show notes as well. So you guys can connect with him. It's easy to do so. And his book is Let Love In. And I just want to actually start the conversation, Jake, with a couple really cool reviews that I saw from your book.
Awesome.
And it's going to kind of get the wheels spinning for our conversation. A couple of the notes here on it, a couple of people that reviewed it said it unlocked another level of their healing. The vulnerability shared in your book is incredibly moving. They say grab the highlighter and prepare to read it twice. Looking at these things aren't easy, but it's necessary for growth. So let's start right there. Can you share what Let Love In, what inspired you to write the book, and how is it helping people who are reading it right now?
Absolutely. Well, the title is Let Love In, but I think the subtitle actually gives you a better picture of what the book is actually about. And that subtitle is The Pain Stops When the Truth Starts. And the reason it's entitled that is because, right around 10 years ago, I was in my mid to late 20s. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was chasing after success. And yet on some deep fundamental level, I felt unhappy. I felt unfulfilled. And on some level felt empty inside. And I started to notice myself repeating certain patterns, some self-limiting patterns, and got to a point within myself where I was like, I need to figure out what is driving these patterns. What's behind them, right? What's going on beneath the surface that I may be unaware of that is ultimately responsible for these various patterns in my life. And to kind of key you in on what those patterns were, I would ultimately self-sabotage in romantic relationship. So right around, 6 months into the relationship, right, when all the masks come off and it's time to allow your true self to be fully seen, I would find some inconspicuous, seemingly insignificant reason to break off the relationship. I also, despite climbing the corporate ladder, despite having achieved a significant degree of personal success for myself, I kept getting let go from every single professional job. In fact, I've been let go from every professional job I've ever had, which is on some level why I was, born for entrepreneurship. But ultimately, it was these things, because the pattern always reveals the problem, that forced me to go down this deeper path of interpersonal work, where I was very much on this individuation journey of establishing myself, right, and self-actualization, if you will. And I was forced to go down this road of transformation, of self-discovery, to determine why I was being held back, what was behind these behavior patterns that was getting in the way of me ultimately operating at my highest, most successful self.
Mm-hmm. So the self-sabotage part, I can relate to that a little bit with myself, even personally, just sabotaging things. And it's like, I got a good relationship, and then I either say or do something, and I just, either act out in a certain way, and it's like I blow it, and it's like, why the heck do I do that? Or I'm just thinking of like past relationships, and in your case, you're saying once you kind of feel like you're starting to get deeper into a relationship with somebody, you start to sabotage it. Can you talk about what personally for you feel? I think there's a lot of guys and gals that are listening right now that can relate to that, where and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they kind of push away when normally the natural response you would think is to fall deeper in love, and then people
Sure.
push that person away. It happens. You see it a lot in romance, in movies and in novels, and
Totally.
but it happens, and it's a real life problem. It's a real life thing. That's why people connect with it. So
Yeah.
what's that barrier or roadblock? Is it past experiences that haven't been healed? What's causing that usually to happen? I mean, everybody's different, but in your case, what was it that
Totally.
causes that?
Well, until we heal the pain from the past, we're just going to continue to recycle it into the present moment. As Carl Jung once said, until you bring the unconscious to the conscious level, it will continue to direct your life, and you will call it fate.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, what ultimately caused me to self-sabotage was the fact that, and this is actually primarily what the book is about, my healing journey, my growth journey in overcoming the sexual abuse that I experienced as a really young child, roughly 12 or 13 years old. I have this incredibly painful experience happen to me. And as you can probably imagine, and to go deeper into your question around what causes people to push away love, what causes people to push away success or opportunity. After my abuse, love, connection, and intimacy fundamentally felt unsafe. And this is where a lot of people find themselves, even if they haven't experienced sexual abuse, because all of us have experienced trauma. And we now know that trauma is much more about what happened inside of us as a result of what happened to us, as opposed to what actually happened.
And it could have also be an experience, like if children see their parents either fighting, or whether that's an abusive situation too, right? Then
Right.
now they're getting into a relationship, and like, let's say a woman, her dad was abusive to her mom.
Sure.
Now she could be afraid, right, to get into something serious, and then is somebody going to do this to me?
Yep.
But in your situation, okay, so, and I know we've talked off camera, we had our previous interview that didn't end up coming out. That's why we're recording this today.
Right.
You shared a little bit of that story. I wanted to make sure the audience heard it. Is there anything you can share there? Because there
Sure.
are people who I know personally, and also that I've listened to on podcasts, that share a story similar to yours, and they all kind of have a different way of how they healed through it. And many times they always feel like it was too late until they told somebody about it. So if you can educate somebody who either is going through this, maybe they know a family member who's going through this, and they'll send them this episode.
Yeah.
What is something that you recommend they do to help get healed so they can then fully love somebody and receive love too?
Totally. Well, in order to improve, in order to transform, we first need to heal, right? In the coaching space and in the self-help space, there's so much that's made of transforming or evolving or becoming the highest version of ourselves. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with that. I think it's very well intended, but we have to heal so that we can transform. If the process of transformation or of healing, there's three primary steps. There's construction, there's deconstruction, and there's reconstruction. Construction is the process of becoming aware of our interpersonal limitations, of our blocks, of our unconscious barriers, of our compensating strategies, and all these adaptive personality traits that we've taken on because it's who we think we need to be in order to be loved and accepted and successful, not who we genuinely, authentically are. So it's becoming aware of all of those things that create internal resistance that ultimately holds us back from receiving a greater degree of love, a greater degree of financial abundance, a greater degree of opportunity. It can be any form of abundance.
Right.
Deconstruction is where we heal all of those things. So that requires going into our pain. So there's an inherent amount of grief and suffering that comes with all of that undoing. And that's why transformation fundamentally is way more about undoing, unlearning, unbecoming than it is about doing or achieving or learning or becoming.
Yeah, it's about getting back to as close to that clean slate as possible, right?
Correct.
We could build back on top of it, build some new foundations on top.
Right. Transformation is always a return back to where we once started as children, because we all came into this world with a clean slate, right? The hero's journey. What's the last step in the hero's journey? If you're familiar with it, it's the hero returns home. It's a framework for storytelling, but it's very much a framework for the interpersonal journey that we were all meant to go on, because we're all wired for transcendence. In the first half of life and in the first stage of life, it's all about individuation, self-actualization, and pursuing what we want. And in the second half of life, it's all about transcendence and transformation, where we get caught up in the pursuit of a higher power and a higher purpose. And so for me, as you can imagine, this traumatic experience caused me to mask, right? To wear these different masks in order to avoid my pain, but also to prevent that pain from happening again. And that's where most people find themselves nowadays. They have experienced some level of pain. Now, there's big T trauma, right? Like I experienced, sexual abuse, assault, an extreme accident. But there's also little T trauma, like you insinuated earlier, where it's more so around like emotional neglect or abandonment or financial scarcity, or even a health scare. All of those things can be inherently traumatic because of what happens inside of us as a result, and how we internalize it, the stories and the beliefs that we make up about ourselves, what we make that experience mean. And so for me, after the fact, love fundamentally felt unsafe because it killed my self-confidence and my self-esteem and my worthiness in terms of what I felt worthy of receiving. And so as a result, it created a host of problems. And that's why I was self-sabotaging at the end of the day, because I didn't feel worthy of love. I didn't feel worthy of success, right? The trauma fundamentally created this fracture in my worthiness and of my willingness to receive and my openness to attracting success into my life. And so if you're listening and you're wanting to grow and you're wanting to evolve into a higher, better version of yourself, or you're wanting to achieve a certain goal, much is going to be made, especially in the online coaching space, about focusing on the habits and the behaviors that you need to adopt in order to accomplish that thing. When in reality, our habits, our behaviors are just symptoms. They are symptoms of what we believe about ourselves.
Yes, they're like a secondary reaction to the self-belief that happens first, right?
Correct.
That does the dictating, and then the feeling, or like you said, symptom comes second.
Yep. The beliefs and the identity that we have taken on as a result of our upbringing, the parenting, the environment that we were raised in, and of course our experiences, which then dictates how we think, how we feel, and therefore how we act. And that's what gets us all of our results. So if all we do is focus on the habits and the behaviors, or biohacking, which is super popular nowadays, if that's all we do, or if that's the primary focus, that will ultimately prove to be incomplete and insufficient. It will very much be like a house built on sand. You can build a house on sand. That's not the question. The question is what happens when the storm comes, right? You will always go back to either your baseline level of happiness or the felt sense of safety that you experience in your nervous system as a result of your present belief and identity. You can't outperform your current beliefs and your current identity.
Yes, you'll always cool back down to it. You might be
correct,
pumped up and you have a great meeting and you had a really good call or two, or you close a deal or two, but eventually if your beliefs weren't really there, like you kind of sold yourself on it a little bit, you kind of cool back down, right? So it's got to really be felt like at the gut level.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And that takes time. That takes working with somebody like yourself.
If you don't have a protocol, you will return to your former behavior. And the way that I like to put it with my clients is that we never rise to the level of our goals. We always fall to the level of our beliefs. And so when you think about growth, when you think about achieving a bigger goal, it all starts internally. with who you be and with how you show up as a result of the beliefs and identity that you've created because of what's happened to you, and then how that shows up in the actions that you take and the decisions that you make. So self-sabotage, when I was going through that period of time and I started picking up on these various patterns that was having me, however consciously or unconsciously, push love away, push success and opportunity away, all I was seeking to do was protect myself from getting hurt again, because that's all that self-sabotage is. It's just self-protection. We make ourselves wrong for it when we do it, when in reality, it's completely understandable and it makes sense based on what we've been through that we are seeking to prevent from happening again.
And I just want to say something. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer that question and not just answer it quickly to get on to the next one.
Yeah.
It's not a comfortable question to answer and go back to that moment. But the reason I'm stopping for a moment is anybody who's listening or watching right now, what I want you to think about is maybe you're the partner that the person you're with is showing signs of maybe they're struggling with some stuff from their past, and they may be not realizing they're either taking it out on you or they're cooling things down in your relationship or love life or whatever it looks like. And, it could be because of the things that Jake's talking about, right? Maybe they got something that they're working through and they're afraid to bring it up to you. So instead of getting upset or mad or frustrated, that's when you can lean into them and say, hey, I really want to help you, whatever this is that you're going through. Like, we can work on this together, and man, that person's going to be able to at least feel that, and then they can start making steps in the right direction. With that said, the person who's still struggling needs to do some inner work with a professional, and build as much, get back to that clean slate again, so you can build some proper beliefs and get their mindset right, get their heart right, so then they can love again and receive love again. That's really good. Powerful right out of the gates here, bringing you the good stuff. Hey, there's this quote on your Instagram post here. It says, the deeper a man's awareness is of his powerlessness, the greater his willingness is to reach out for support. This is what we're just talking about. It's funny that I pulled that quote. Therein lies his power and strength. So right there, it hits on what we were just talking about. Is that also part of what you call the awakened alpha? I want you to kind of elaborate on that term.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the quote was really meant to highlight a paradox, right? Which is that in acknowledging my weakness, therefore I am operating from a place of strength, right? Powerful powerlessness. That's what that is to emulate, right? And display. It is the power that comes with someone asking for support or someone acknowledging that this is too big for me to overcome myself, right? Because this is the trap that so many men fall into, which is why I think Thoreau mentioned that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Because what do we do with our weaknesses? We tend to hide them. We tend to suppress them, right? Rather than acknowledge them, rather than tell others about them because we need their support. If you're familiar with any 12-step program, the first step in any 12-step program is I can't. It can be fundamentally summed up as that. I can't. And so by acknowledging my weakness, I am therefore operating from a place of power and stepping into my power. So that's what that quote was ultimately meant to illustrate.
When you say I can't, Jake, do you mean that they're admitting that they cannot do it by themselves? They really do need to get help.
Yep. I am powerless over my addiction. And that's the starting point for change to happen.
For getting help, or change.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that we're all addicted to something. It's just a question of what. A lot of us are just, we're addicted to self-actualization, right? Constantly being better, a better, higher version of ourselves, which often puts us at odds within ourselves, right? We're rich in money, but we're poor in spirit. And so this is at the crux of a lot of the work that I do with men is to come back into wholeness, because so many men nowadays are chasing after success or achievement or accomplishment. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with that. But at the end of the day, and in my experience and the men that I work with, is that always proves to be incomplete and insufficient at the end of the day when it comes to matters of the heart and experiencing peace and a deeper level of overall fulfillment in one's life and with one's purpose. And so trauma fractures that, right? There's a separation that ultimately occurs that prevents us from living into the highest, truest, most authentic version of who we really are, which is when we can really embrace the life that we want to lead, not the life that we think we need to lead, or embrace who we really are and not who we think we need to be for the sake of pleasing other people, or for the sake of living up to some expectation that was created for us. Maybe it was by somebody else, or maybe it was just, our own imagination, whatever it may be, or our own aspirations. And so until we come back into wholeness, we're going to have a very difficult time experiencing peace or knowing peace.
The word that comes to me right now is fulfillment as well. Like a lot of times people are chasing, the image, the financial account, the vacations that they see their friends going on and stuff. And I'm not saying that those things are not nice to have, and we all want them too. And it's not a bad thing. It's just if that's the thing that you're actually after, opposed to the word or the feeling of fulfillment, I should say.
Yep.
How often does someone come up to you? They're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And kind of, they ask you. It's usually like job. Are you married? Do you have kids?
Sure.
Like the weather. Where do you live? Yep. And then if they know the city that you live in, they throw some zinger at you, like, "Oh, Buffalo. Okay, so you're a Bills fan." And it just kind of starts somewhere, common ground. But rarely does anyone ever ask you about, what fills you up, what fuels you, what
are you passionate about?
What are you passionate about? Why do you do that podcast, man? Like, what gets you going? It's always like these real short, shallow things that we kind of stack on a resume of who we are, kind of as if we're walking like a social media profile alongside.
Right.
So what I want to hit on, it's really important that we talked about going back into our past, and some things could be very present. Maybe they're fresh. Someone's going through some real stuff right now. So it's not even that far in their past that they're healing and they're going through and doing all this stuff. Something that's really important, and I know looking at your work and your book, is that, our past does not define our future. Mm-hmm. And that's the best news you can get, because if you're not really happy with where you're at this point, the greatest news is, man, that doesn't define you. You can still come out. Your story can be told. Your legacy can still be told completely different than maybe the hand you were dealt, or hands, or multiple years of bad things happening, or whatever situation someone's coming from. So share your thoughts and kind of elaborate on identity and how people maybe need to break the chains from their past identity and move it into that future version of themselves that they aspire to be.
Sure. Well, I think it's important to understand that the number one goal of the ego is to maintain the status quo. And when I say ego, I mean the false self, the false personas that we all, however unconsciously have taken on in order to be loved, accepted, and successful. That isn't who we truly, genuinely are deep down. And so it puts us at odds within ourselves, and it creates this internal resistance that creates barriers between us and having the life that we want to have, or being the person that we truly aspire to be, accomplishing whatever higher purpose or dream that we may have for ourselves or our family. And so I think it's really important to understand that the ego's goal, when it comes to maintaining the status quo, what's the best way for it to do that? It's to hide the truth from you. Mm-hmm. It's to hide what's really going on beneath the surface, right? Hiding these barriers, these limitations in your unconscious mind where you can't see and you can't touch. And this is why when someone asks me, what do you do? I say, I help men go to places within themselves that they can't get to on their own.
Mm.
because 90 to 95% of our behavior is dictated by our unconscious mind.
Yeah, it's almost like a survival mechanism of
Yep.
needing to do the hard work.
Correct. It's this
Somebody's
automatic
maybe
patterning.
not choosing, they may not be choosing that,
Yep.
but that's what's happening in
Correct.
their brain. Their brain doesn't want to go somewhere that's like, man, there's some stuff there that we got to work on. Well, we just kind of hang out over here and we do these things that make you feel good. It kind of masks some of that real stuff that needs to happen. And I know some
Correct.
people in my life personally that can use some work in those areas, myself included. But yeah, that's a really good conversation for people to hear, because this is real stuff. This is like, we're talking, people could be 7-figure earners and have it all, but they can struggle with what we're talking about right here, and they can still feel, even with having it all financially, the vacations, the family, the everything, the cars, they could still feel off.
100%.
And this is why. This is why. So how do you get in there? How do you chisel some of that down?
Most of us are simply living out the beliefs that we picked up and the identity that we created between the ages of 2 and 7. And we're just continuing to repeat and recycle those beliefs and living from the space of that identity. So what I oftentimes say to my clients is that the pattern always reveals the problem. The reason that people don't get to where they really want to go in life or accomplish the goals that they have for themselves is because at present, their unconscious beliefs are not a match for their conscious desires. And so this creates a lack of congruence. It creates resistance. And that's when you see people sabotage. That's when you see people give in to fear. They say one thing or they do another, right? They do that which they don't want to do, right? Because despite their conscious desires, what's actually running the show? It's their unconscious beliefs and this identity that their actions and their decisions are simply being driven by. And so that's where we have to go first and foremost when it comes to creating any semblance of meaningful, long-lasting, sustainable change, right? Because that's the goal, right? With enough willpower, with enough discipline, with enough, high performance coaching, I can get anybody to pretty much do anything if they're committed and they're coachable. That's not the question.
Is that the intrinsic confidence versus
Correct.
extrinsic confidence? Okay, so making sure.
Correct.
I learned a little bit something from our last conversation.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. And so you can accomplish these goals, but because nothing has fundamentally shifted within you internally, because the foundation is the same, the roots are the same, what ends up happening? You return to your former identity. And whatever results you created over here by way of, strong willpower and discipline and, new high performance habits, eventually prove to be insufficient for the task, which is long lasting, sustainable transformation. Always. That's what I'm really about in the work that I do with my clients and with men. And so that has to happen in order for that to happen, for transformation to really occur. And for it to be embodied, right? Fully embodied. And what I mean by embodied is change. It's no longer just a matter of knowledge and information. It's truly been integrated into your life as new habits and new behaviors as a result of this transformed identity that is no longer acting unconsciously from the space of the past and therefore just continuing to repeat unhealthy patterns in the present. You have transcended all of that, which is why I say that we're actually wired for transcendence. Mm-hmm. And that's always, in my experience, it leads you to either a higher purpose or a higher power where you move beyond these smaller desires, for greater success, all of these self-actualization based things. And you go on this deeper, further journey where you can actually know peace, where you can know true fulfillment and the desires of your heart, not like this false performative part of you, but the true you can bring into reality.
Really, really well said. So can you tell us, has there been, give us maybe an example? I know with clients it's confidential and
Sure.
you don't want to really give away
You're fine.
too much, but somebody who came to you and there was maybe a lot of work there that had to be done.
Yep.
And again, they don't know what they don't know.
Correct.
They just know something's not right. They come to you like, we need to figure this out. And then you say, hey, I can really help people unlock parts of themselves that they cannot really tap into by themselves.
Yeah, this happened recently with me, actually. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because a lot of men report the same thing upon doing a little bit of work with me, which is, this work has changed my life entirely, but I didn't know I needed it.
Wow.
And this specific client shared that exact thing, because when we first started working together and we started to delve into his past and the experiences that created the beliefs that he currently has, and we started to bring those to the surface, what presented itself was a very clear father hunger and father wound. And this is a guy who is incredibly successful. His dad has always been there in his life in some way, shape, or form. But what revealed itself was this very clear, very apparent father hunger, father wound as a result of the relationship that he had with his dad growing up. And we're on this call together, and we just hop on. We've been on the call for maybe a minute. And he goes, Jake, I'm realizing that the first $1 million I made was to prove my dad wrong. And he just breaks down.
Yeah.
He was just struck by this reality that his ego was hiding from him, because the ego, it always has something to prove and it always has something to protect. So whenever we're operating from the space of that part of ourselves, and it's important to understand that part never actually truly goes away, right? It's always going to be there, and our life and growth in relationship to it is always going to be very nonlinear in nature. As much as we would like it to be like this slow and steady continual progression, it's always a coming back to and a rediscovering of who we authentically are deep down.
It's like you have a roadmap, but you really don't know what's, there's going to be bumps, there's going to be roads, there's going to be off-road.
Right.
It's not like when you're working with somebody that you're like, I have the exact solution, 2 + 2 is 4, and it's just the same every time.
Right. Well,
so this person you're unlocking, and they're coming to this realization, man. And so he broke down because he realized his goals were all intertwined to this emptiness he had. Maybe he felt like he wasn't amounting to enough for his dad, or he's trying to prove, maybe his dad told him he wasn't, good enough, or whatever it might be. And so now he's compensating for that, opposed to just being fulfilled. So how does he move to the next stage of now kind of getting himself working for him and not working for maybe the wrong? What's the next step for him look like?
And I'm happy you brought that up. You hit the nail on the head, right? That all of his ambition was built upon this need to prove his dad wrong, that he was good enough, because how he interpreted the way that his dad raised him was that I'm not good enough, or I'll never be able to do enough to make you proud or make you happy, to please you. And so all of his ambition was driven by this unconscious belief that he wasn't good enough for his dad, but that at the end of the day created this hollowness, this emptiness within him that no external result would ever be able to adequately fill or suffice. And so, and this is to go back to the intrinsic confidence versus extrinsic confidence. The journey of transformation is fundamentally coming back into wholeness. And so it's one thing to identify the wound. It's a whole other thing to grieve the wound so that we can release those emotions that are attached to these former experiences. And that's when we clear out the resistance, right? We clear out the tension that is currently living, somatically speaking, within our body. That's what soma, meaning body, because somatic experiencing is a lot of the work. It's one of the primary modalities that I use in my work with my clients, is a clearing out of the old, right? Feeling, grieving these emotions that are still attached to these painful experiences that we've had in the past, so that there's no longer these tethers. There's no longer these invisible anchors holding us back. And so we start to ascend in the different areas of our life when it comes to health, wealth, and relationships so much more easily. That's where we start to reconstruct, right? Construction, deconstruction, reconstruction. In deconstruction, we break down, we heal from, and we break through all of the tethers from the past, right? We undo the invisible anchors that create the inherent resistance that we experience when it comes to creating a deep, meaningful romantic relationship, or creating a successful business, or generating significant opportunities for ourselves or for our family or whatever it may be. All of a sudden, we're able to move so much more seamlessly and ascend that much more rapidly in the direction of our goals, of our dreams, where it's no longer ego driven. It's no longer driven by comparison or competition. It's simply this organic, free response to our most deeply held desires.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff becomes so much more easy. Resistance is the number one thing that holds people back from creating the life that they truly want.
And the number one thing stopping them from getting it, is themselves.
100%. Absolutely.
Which is amazing news for everybody tuning in right now.
Right.
Who may be nodding their head like me,
Yep.
going, man, there's still some things, I got to do some work here.
Absolutely.
There's still some stuff there that needs some work.
Yeah.
Man, this is so good. This is so good. I know we're flying. Like we were just spitballing there for like 40 minutes straight. We're gonna give our sponsors some love. We'll be right back with Jake. Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Hey guys, it's Mike. I'd like to give a proper shout out to Navigator Bookkeeping. Look, for a long time, I ran my business without really understanding the full financial picture. I used my gut and my bank account balance to make decisions, which led to some poor choices and constant stress over my business's finances. I knew something needed to change. At the beginning of 2021, I made a decision that helped pave a more clear path for my business. I started working with Navigator Bookkeeping. Since then, my bookkeeping has been handled for me. I now understand the full financial story of my business, making important financial decisions much easier now, and it helps me plan for where my business is going. I highly recommend giving Navigator Bookkeeping an opportunity to help your business. Check them out at navigatingyourbooks.com. Again, that's navigatingyourbooks.com. It's time to know the full financial story of your business. All right, we're back in action with Jake Kauffman. And remember, you can connect with him on social media and his website. And I have both of those clickable in the show notes for you, so you don't have to worry about spelling Kauffman. It does have the 2 F's in there, just so you guys know. All right, so we're going to get back to it, man. This has been one of my favorite conversations. I'm just sitting back, like, learning a ton. And one thing you mentioned is between who we are right now and who we were meant to be, there's this gap, right? And in this gap is tension, right? So most men seek to conquer, or they overcome this tension, which only seeks to serve the ego. We talked about it. So how do we properly narrow the gap? So that's kind of like leads us into what we were just talking about. What are some ways if somebody listened to that last segment before the break and they're like, okay, like Jake, what do I do next? Like, what are some steps I can take?
Yeah. Well, like we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, we have to heal before we can transform. Right? Most people run to high performance habits and biohacking and setting goals for themselves to inspire them to move and change. But they still have these invisible anchors that are holding them back, that are the source of the resistance that they experience within themselves that prevents them from not just reaching those things, because it's one thing to reach those things, but it's a whole other thing to accomplish them and then continue to maintain them, right? Because if we can't maintain them, what's the point? So we have to heal before we can transform. And I know a lot of people, when they hear that, are like, shit. Because, like, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that, like, hey, the key to getting everything that you want in life is actually to go into your pain, the pain from the past that you are likely unconsciously recycling into the present. And that is at the source of whatever resistance you experience when it comes to reaching your goals. Nobody wants to hear that. That's not sexy. How do you market that? Right? Like you don't. And for men, and for men especially, there are two primary catalysts for transformation, and that's great love and great suffering. Mm-hmm. And as men, we just, for some reason, we seem to need a big smack upside the head that gets us to wake up to all of these egoic games that we've been playing, where we're primarily focused on the pursuit of power and possession and prestige. Not that there's anything wrong with any of that. I don't want anyone to listen to this and feel like, oh, well, I should just abandon any, revenue goals that I have for me and my business, or, monetary goals when it comes to saving for my family. That's not what I'm saying. It's
almost like an adrenaline that we need. We get hit, we get struck with something. If someone says you can't do it, then you're like more motivated than if they told you if someone says you can, kind of like the guy who hit $1 million inspired by the I can't from a family member.
Bingo.
And it's like, shit, that was a bigger voice in that guy's head.
Correct.
Than it was in his own heart that, yeah, you can do this and you could do some cool stuff.
Correct.
Who knows if he hits $1 million. So
correct. Yeah, it's all about the unconscious motivation. The unconscious motivation beneath the conscious desire or the external behavior. Because that's the truth. That's reality. Our unconscious mind, which dictates our behavior, is reality. And you are right. My client was, after doing a little bit of work together, was met by this reality that, like, oh my goodness, all of this success that I've created, which is very real, was all in an attempt to prove my dad wrong. No one.
And did he end up doing that, by the way? I'm curious, like, did he end up having a relationship at that point in time with his dad?
So when he said that, he had a relationship with his dad, and he still has a relationship with his dad to this day, although there have been, some needed boundaries put in place, healthy boundaries, which is, I think every healthy relationship at least needs healthy boundaries, but suffice it to say that opened the door for healing, because here he was having this very successful 7-figure business, and on some level, was left empty and wanting, and he didn't know why. And that's part of the reason he started working with me, was that, like, Jake, I have all these things, but, like, deep down, like, I feel empty. I don't feel happy. I don't really experience fulfillment. I accomplish whatever goal I set out to accomplish, and then I get there and I'm met by the same thing. I'm met by this unhappiness. I'm met by the emptiness and the emotions that come with that. Because, of course, there are very specific emotions that come with that, right? Frustration, sadness for some, anger for other people. And then he's left to deal with that. And he didn't know why that was. He didn't have an explanation for it. And so when he came to me, it became, as you can probably imagine, very clear just in our initial conversation, even before we started working together, that there's some unreconciled pain from the past here that's just recycling in the present moment that you're just unaware of, you're unconscious to in this moment, that is ultimately at the root of this emptiness, this lack of fulfillment that you experience despite reaching your goals. So whether you struggle to reach your goals or whether you reach your goals and you struggle to be happy once you do, most of the time, in most instances, that is a sign of unacknowledged or unexpressed pain.
That's good, man. So I want to encourage anybody who's dealt with that, dealing with that currently, check out Jake. Again, I have his information in the notes, and you're willing to meet with somebody, obviously, to kind of talk first and see if it's a good fit. This is not an infomercial style podcast, but whenever someone on the show like Jake is here and has something that is so valuable, I want to connect the audience with you so you can do what you're called to do. And that's
I
the
appreciate
thing, man.
that.
You know, I just want to say, like, I know a lot of times people who've been through this personally yourself, going through some of those tough things you did when you were younger and through your, as you were growing up. Now you can serve from this place of having been there, opposed to I'm educating through education. Basically, I read this book that this is what I should be telling you to do,
Right.
opposed to I actually felt this and I know that the next step looks and feels like this. We're going to get you there.
Totally.
And so you're very much side by side with him walking through the journey, but man, you've been there. So now you know what that looks like. So a couple of things I want to talk about before you do run here is a little bit about you, and what you're doing now. I know you're doing very well in business, but what are some non-negotiables, like things you wake up every day and you make sure you hit on these things because it's going to make you a better person? What are some things that make you tick?
Well, self-growth and transformation, number one.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not just my vocation and my profession. It's also my passion, because.
So what do you do? Are you like listening to podcasts, reading books? What does that look like?
Great question. Well, I think podcasts and books are a great place to start, and not to knock on podcasts, because I realize if you're listening to this, you're like, I'm listening to a podcast. And you should absolutely support fellow podcasters like Mike. You can only get so far by listening to books and podcasts, because your ego is still actively working to hide things in your unconscious mind and to prevent you from growing, because in order to grow, we have to do what? We have to step outside of our comfort zone. Well, that's inherently scary. And so we resist doing that. But for me, the practice is, number one, non-negotiable, is meditation. You have to have a spiritual practice that forces you to go beyond the mind, right? Beyond the mind. So that you can absolutely, not just feel it in your body, but improve your beingness. Right? My deepest DNA is in God, or is wired for transcendence. If you don't prefer the language of God, it's at the end of the day, it's all the same thing. It's also working with a coach, working with a therapist. I do those things regularly and consistently because I believe in being the source of the work that I'm inviting other people into doing, first and foremost. And obviously, the more that I do this work on myself, the more value I'm able to offer to my coaching clients and to my broader audience, even if they never end up working with me. And so meditation, solitude, silence, you have to have these non-performative spiritual practices that force you to go beyond the mind, because when we move beyond the mind, we're met with the reality of who we are authentically, truly. And that is at the crux of coming back to wholeness. It's central to the journey of coming back to wholeness. And then meeting with a coach, meeting with a therapist who can support me in identifying my blind spots, right? Who can help me in overcoming my fear and my internal resistance that still to this day comes up for me when it comes to receiving love and giving love in return, or creating more financial abundance in my life, or attracting more opportunity into my life. And that's why the book's called Let Love In, because we all have a threshold in terms of what we feel safe to receive, whether it's love, whether it's financial abundance, or whether it's opportunity. Anything beyond that, our nervous system, our body experiences as a threat. And so what will it do inevitably? It will self-sabotage. It will self-protect in an effort to return to homeostasis, what we know, what is familiar to us. And that's why we as humans have such a difficult time evolving and growing and ascending into higher levels of love and financial abundance and opportunity. Right? And again, I'm not going to sit here and paint this picture or operate under any illusion that it's, like I said, a straight linear journey. Life growth is inherently this journey of 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's volatile, but the question is it volatile in the right direction? Right? Right? Are you the same person a year from now? You know?
I hope not. I hope everybody's
Right.
willing to work on themselves in some regard where they're improved in multiple levels.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And that's the key benchmark.
Growth.
Yeah, that's the key benchmark, right?
Yeah.
Are you in the same place
Yeah.
a year from now that you are today?
Mm-hmm.
Are you the same person a year from now that you are today? And I think most people who are listening to this podcast, yourself, myself included, are like, well, we want to be in a different place a year from now. Like if life happens to shake out in some various unexpected way, would we be okay within ourselves, or would we be at peace if we were still in the same place for reasons outside of our control? Sure. I think there's some level of acceptance that needs to be embraced in that, because life, again, isn't always about growth.
Or it doesn't always happen in 1 year either.
Correct, right.
You know, we live in a society where things happen in 30 and 60 seconds. We see it on our phone.
Correct.
And then relationships and really important, deeper growth and things that are going to be, lifelong change doesn't always happen within 12 months. Now, in 12 months, it's kind of like the slingshot method where, you might feel like you're still in the same spot or a little bit behind,
Sure.
but everything you learned and the hard work you've put in, whether it's entrepreneurship or personal development, you might feel like you're kind of sitting in that same spot, but it's going to really skyrocket you if you are doing those right things and you compound on them. And I'm not educating you because you know this already, but
I love it.
Because I know in some ways I feel like I'm very similar to where I was last year with some things in life. And then even if I'm either physically in the same place, and because I'm actually planning to move to be closer to my daughter, and I thought I'd be able to do that a lot sooner, just speaking truth here.
Sure.
And it's taken me longer to make that a reality. And so that does frustrate me. But at the same time, I know there's so many good things that have come that I have learned that now when I go to make that, I'll be even more ready for it, and I'll be in the right heart, in the right place, in the right person for that, and everything else that comes with it. So I think this is an awesome conversation, and really appreciate you giving us a full hour of your time today. I got a couple more questions for you here to knock out of the park.
Let's do it.
So you're the author. I know you're an author of this beautiful book, Let Love In, but you're the author and protagonist. Yeah, go ahead. You have it right there.
Go.
Show it off. Look at that. Look at that right there. So you're the author and the protagonist in your own life story. We're talking about this journey, right? You get to write the ending, and God willing, you continue to live a long, prosperous life. You're looking back on it, Jake, and you're reflecting, and you get to define your legacy. What would that be?
I truly believe that love, fundamentally speaking, is the acknowledgement of oneself in another. That creates this realization that we're not separate. One of the things that the ego needs to thrive is contrarianism, which keeps us in a tribal society and tribal religion, where it's very much us against them, whoever them is, or our beliefs against their beliefs, our ideology versus their ideology, and of course, our beliefs and our ideology is always the best. Right? It's always the best. My legacy would be that we as a society, as humanity, come into oneness, come back to love, where we recognize ourselves as a collective in another, where We no longer have anything to prove. We have nothing to protect. Because that would mean the end of war. And I'm not just saying that like, the end of war in my lifetime is the goal, world peace.
I remember being a kid, Jake, and I mean, maybe early teens, and just thinking, why is it so hard for everybody? All these different countries that are at war and at each other's throats all the time. I'm watching the news, and it's like, man, there's people in school I don't necessarily like what they like, or I don't like the way that they're acting, but it's like, I don't hate on them. I'm not going to go hurt them. I'm not going to get in a fight with them. Like, we're just gonna, everything's cool. Like, we can agree to disagree. And it's like, why with politics and wars and stuff, people can't just like, hey, let's take care of people. And if you don't want to help someone else out, I'm not saying to do that, but like a country that's at ends with another country, like they want to go to war with them, it's like, just take care of your own people or something. Like, do some good and just ignore the people you don't maybe like. And it's like, it seems so easy, but why is it not that easy? And one more quote from your website I'm looking at over here. It says, we never rise to the level of our goals. We always fall to the level of our beliefs. And that's your quote. Mm-hmm. And you said it earlier on the episode. And I want, if anybody takes one thing away from this episode, I want that to be it. Yep. We never rise to the level of our goals. We always fall to the level of our beliefs. And the great news, again, is what? They get to control those beliefs.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can transform those.
Yeah, man. Hit us home. Any last things you want to share with our audience today?
The way up is the way down. The path forward is the way back. Mm-hmm. It's the great paradox in life, as much as we try to deny it, that, we lose it to find it. We give it away to keep it. Mm-hmm. We suffer to get well. We die to live. That is the pattern, as much as we try to resist it and deny it all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I say that to say, we heal so that we can transform, so that we can transcend. Right. That's what growth is really all about. Mm-hmm. Anything that, or any coach or anyone or anything that doesn't have an honest conversation with you about dying in order to achieve, mm-hmm. I would be highly skeptical of it.
Yeah.
I would be highly skeptical of it.
Jake, it goes back to the whole thing about peace, like, and why it seems so difficult. It's like, well, I think I know the answer to my own question. It's because of what we're talking about. The people that are not peaceful and that are, causing, harm on people, death, wars, fighting, all this stuff, this gruesome stuff, is because they haven't done any of this inner work. Not even close. Not even close. Right. They're like way out of alignment. So we're talking about getting to a place, overcompensating and all this other crazy stuff. We're talking about just getting back to centered so you can then give love and receive love. And mm-hmm. that cannot happen if you have all kinds of barriers and doors that you didn't even know were there, locked, and combination lock on that locker and
100%.
Yeah. So this conversation is really step one. You talked about it too, like books and podcasts. It's really like that's your gateway. Get in there. It's getting you some information. You really want to do the work. You do need to work with a professional like Jake. So if you're listening to this,
I appreciate that.
This conversation was my bridge to get you to Jake, or to get you thinking about this stuff the right way. So I appreciate everybody, again, who's tuning in here. Again, the book is Let Love In. The website is awakewithjake.com. Check him out on social media. This is absolutely amazing. I always end every episode with this, Jake. Be great and be grateful. And I'm grateful for you coming on the show today.
Grateful to be here, Mike, and thanks again for having me, brother.
Thank you for hanging with us all the way until the end. If you haven't done it already, you can click right over here to subscribe to my channel. Make sure you turn on your notifications so you're notified of all of the updates. If you guys like shorter clips, I have mic drop moments right here. That's when my guest gives an amazing insight, and we capture that right here. Mic drop moments, and down here are the full-length episodes. All my previous episodes are right there.